Chairman. Mr. Archivist, I want to thank you again for coming to South Carolina. You were and remain a big hit with everyone who had a chance to hear you, and I've had a number of people ask that you come back to South Carolina and that I not come back to South Carolina. So with respect to the retention of documents, can you give us, not as an expert, just 35,000-foot level, why is it important that we as a republic retain documents?
So that the American people can hold their government accountable, so that they can see for themselves how decisions were made, so that they can learn themselves from the original documents about our history.
Right. There strikes me that there's a historical component, there's a constitutional component, so you can have checks on the separation of powers, and there's also a legal component. And you were gracious enough to brag about not being a lawyer earlier. We have an expert lawyer sitting beside you, so I'm going to ask Ms. O'Connor what spoliation of evidence is.
So I encountered that once in a case, and what happened was that after the case had begun, somebody who worked for one of the parties, without realizing the material was supposed to have been kept, destroyed it, burned it is what happened, and then it wasn't available for the trial. And
right, and from an evidentiary standpoint, what happens? There's a presumption that whatever you destroyed or altered would not have been good for you, right?
So the judge had to go through an effort of evaluating whether or not there should be a negative inference from that.
Well, the jury can decide that. The judge decides whether or not to charge that, but the jury ultimately determines whether or not to draw that inference. And it's important for us to know that the reason we have that spoliation of evidence in the law is so that people don't destroy evidence that would not be favorable to them. I mean, it's commonsensical. If you can get away with destroying evidence that's not favorable to you, everyone would do it. So we have to have a presumption built in. And with respect to my colleague, the former United States Attorney from Pennsylvania, you talked about search terms. I got to be candid with you. I don't know what search term you would use if you're looking for an email where Lois Lerner responds, "You who," when somebody says a Democrat beat a Republican the night before. What search term would you recommend?
So I haven't looked at them in a while, but I'm pretty sure Democrat and Republican were on the list. So that
but what if Democrat and Republican weren't in the email? What if they used the name of the Democrat who beat the name of the Republican and her response was "You who"?
So most of the terms came from the majority staff of this committee and included many politicians.
But what's wrong with the search terms being to and from?
Well, that would get you everything.
Right, that's my point.
The purpose of reducing the amount to review in order to get
But why? Why reduce it? If you want access to all of the information, if you want access to all of the truth, why are you reducing the search terms? Why not just to Lois Lerner and from Lois Lerner?
Right. As I explained earlier, I can't remember if you were here, at the beginning of the project, we met with the staffs of the four committees.
Right, and it's important to note that that was your request to meet with them because you thought the original request was too voluminous. And my response is when any administration, Republican, Democrat, Whig, Bull Moose, don't care. But when you come to a committee of Congress and you try to negotiate a reduction in the search terms, because of time constraints or resources, and this happens, let me tell you, the next subpoena you're going to get is going to be simply to and from, and you can save yourself a trip to come over and try to negotiate the terms. It was done to make life easier for you, not for Congress. Agreed?
Honestly, it was done in order to get you the material you wanted faster.
Well, it didn't wind up happening, so shame on us if we let it happen again. What negative inference would you draw from the failure to retain the documents in this particular case?
You're talking about Ms. Lerner's hard drive crash?
No, what I'm talking about is the failure to retain, whatever the mechanism of the failure, whether it's intentional or just negligent. You have someone who said maybe the FEC will save the day. You have someone who said we need a project, but we need to make sure it's not per se political, and then the emails disappear. What negative inference would you draw if you were just one of our fellow citizens watching this? You know that initially there was a denial of targeting. You know that she picked a very obscure ABA conference to disclose that targeting had taken place. You know that initially it was blamed on two rogue agents. In fact, Jay Carney perpetuated that myth. You know that Lois Lerner took the Fifth Amendment. You know that the President of the United States said there's not a smidgen of corruption. And now you're told that the evidence doesn't exist. The emails don't exist. What negative inference? If you were just a regular citizen sitting at home watching this, and you've got that litany of failed defenses, those false exculpatory statements, and now you're told that evidence doesn't exist, what negative inference would you draw?
One of the things that I found instructive in the material that became public in the last week was that Ms. Lerner had sent her hard drive to the Criminal Investigative Unit for them to attempt to recover it. And the inference that I would draw is that if she wanted intentionally to destroy the material, she would not have sent it to the Criminal Investigative Unit.
Did she ever use her personal computer?
I don't know.
She did.
The gentleman's time has expired. Now I recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here, subpoena or not. Appreciate the work that you do.
If we